Good evening, Mr. Storm.
Good evening, Rhonda.
How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Excited to
so
talk
much.
to you.
Yes, I've been looking forward to this all day. Thank you so much for joining us on our fourth segment of Crucial Conversations. Normally in black and white, we're going to kind of flip the script a little bit this time, and it's going to be Crucial Conversations about black and white.
Okay.
As you know, I launched a partnership this past summer called Allies for Justice, and we focus on facilitating, advocating, mediating, and educating. And the F is near and dear to my heart because we like to facilitate crucial and honest and sometimes difficult conversations. And they, even though they're difficult, they're always courageous, and I appreciate your time. So for those who are watching, I'm going to ask Mr. Storm 3 questions. When he was first aware of the color line, how he bridged the gap or crossed the color line, and some ways that he can help us perhaps dispel the lingering and pervasive images of the color line in our daily lives. So are you ready to do this?
I am.
Terrific. First of all, when were you first aware of the color line?
I lived a very segregated life. I was born in Iowa. We moved to Dallas, Texas when I was 4, and everything was segregated. I lived there until the age of 16, and my life was definitely white. The first time I was ever in the same room with a black person, I was 6 years old. My mother had had cancer and given birth to my little brother a day and a half afterward. And we had a woman that came and stayed with us and took care of us in the house, and she was black. And that kind of opened the whole conversation in our house about race. I had a wonderful home in that I was raised by parents who were decidedly not racist and emphasized those things as they came up. But we still lived a segregated life. My life did not become desegregated, so to speak, until we moved to Maryland.
Oh, that's what I want to talk about, when you cross that color line.
Yeah. I was 16. It was unique because all the schools in Dallas were segregated, even though they claimed to be desegregated. They gerrymandered the lines, so that didn't occur at all. I went to Easton High School. I was 16 years old, and it was 2 weeks into the school year. But we moved to Oxford. So we moved from this city of like 1 million people, if you included the suburbs, to a town of about 1,000. And I think that's if you included the pets. And the cool thing about the town was that it was just a great experience and a unique experience, especially from the race standpoint. My brother and I were the first night we were there, the first evening that we were there, went walking around town. And there was uptown and there was downtown. So the town was still segregated because of our upbringing. We had no real preconceived notions. I mean, we had been around bigots our whole life, but we didn't give them much weight because we knew how stupid it was, and we just kind of ignored it. All of a sudden, we're in this town and we're walking down the street. So we're walking downtown, and all of a sudden we notice that people are coming out of their houses, whether to say hi or just to wonder what 2 white boys were doing walking down the street as it was getting dark. And we met some wonderful people right away. And they ended up being our best friends, Michael and David Williams, and the whole Williams family. It was just awesome.
And these were black folks?
It was not without difficulties.
These were black folks, the Williams family.
They were.
Yes.
They were. I thought, this is awesome. This is just like, I mean, it was a new experience, but it was one that was just very natural. And, you know, it was like getting to meet any new friend.
Right, because you were a new resident.
When I got to school.
Yeah. Oh,
So I'm 2 weeks into the school year, and I I recognized that, I mean, I was in college prep classes, and I recognized that there were very, very few African American students in those classes. And that kind of puzzled me because in school in Dallas, that was, I mean, everything was college prep, or it was for me. And I just thought that the classes would be mixed. I got to chemistry class, and that was the shock. That was the one that really hit me in the face. You walk in there and everybody's sitting at lab tables, and it was sad because there was one young black man in the class, and everything else was Caucasian, and they're sharing lab tables, and he's sitting at a lab table by himself. Well, there's plenty of chairs at his lab table, so I go over there and sit down. And right out loud in the class, another student, a young man says, "You don't have to sit there." And I was like puzzled, and he said, "No, you don't." And he says, "You can come sit with us, or you can sit at another table." And I looked at the teacher, and the teacher wasn't saying anything, but you could tell he was a little taken aback by it. And I said, "Is it okay if I sit here?" He says, "Certainly." And then I heard the person mutter, "N lover." And I thought to myself, are you serious? Did this really just happen? And
wow.
as I went out of class, I was greeted with some other comments as well. And that was the big shocker to me, because I thought, here I am moving up north, and I'm not going to see this. And the poor kid that was with me, and it was the best decision I could have made, because he was brilliant. So he helped me breeze through chemistry. So that other guy, I wasn't so certain about his intellect, and questioned it on many occasions just based on his racial views. But anyway.
But he said you don't have to sit there.
Yeah. And I still remember the guy at the table just kind of bowing his head. And it was just like, this is something I have to accept. And all I could think of was, wow, how horrible is this going to be? And that wasn't the only occurrence there at the school. It was kind of shocking. And the lines there were drawn very clearly too. The color lines were drawn very clearly.
And for those who,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, for those who may not know, Easton, Maryland is Frederick Douglass territory.
That's what it is. That's what it is. And it was unique because we're sitting at lunch. There were a group of us. There were like a couple of tables, and there were a bunch of us that didn't care about all this nonsense. And there we were, black, white, male, female, and we just sit there. And I don't ever remember, while I was sitting at that table, ever seeing color. I never felt color until someone forced it or someone raised it. So it was just it was foreign to us.
But were there tables of color and tables of
oh my yes
jocks,
the whole room
and
was
tables
segregated. You had I guess I can use all this terminology. You had the jocks, you had the athletes, you had the wealthy whites sitting together, you had blacks sitting together. I guess we were considered, I don't know, like the hippies or the freaks, because some of us had longer hair, but I think we were considered odd because it didn't matter to us. So we had the best tables in the there. I mean, there wasn't any two ways about it. So
wow. I'm still blown away by the guy saying you don't have to sit there.
Well, I guess that was the thing. The thing that's kind of disturbing about all of this is it didn't go away. It didn't go. We moved away we moved to Annapolis the next year. And it was like every weekend I'm going back to see the Williams. I'm going back to see my friends there. And they had the same, like, tap on the door, open it up, and say, "Hey, I'm here," and walk in your house type privileges that I had at their house. And they had lost their dad, So my dad was really special to them, and he'd come over and he just took such a great interest in them. And it was, you know, it was just a very, very natural thing. Towards the end of the year at Easton, they had this like ceremony putting people into the honor society. And I still remember this. They had like the National Honor Society, and I was given the heads up that I was going to be in there. Well, I'm sitting with some of my friends, both white and black, and we were all college prep and doing rather well. And I wasn't the brightest of that group. I made good grades, but they come over and they ignored. I could see as they're walking through the room, they had this little process where they tapped you with a candle and gave you something. You were supposed to walk up with them or whatever. And as I'm noticing this, I see that there isn't a single African-American kid that's getting tapped in that whole room. And I thought, this is something wrong with this. And when they came over and tapped me, I gave them a suggestion where the candle could go. And I just stayed in my seat, because there was no way that I was going to participate in that any more than I was going to sit at a different lab table. But when I got to Annapolis High, it was the exact same thing. I was in physics class. Once again, here are all these other lab tables that are full of people sitting there, and there's one lab table with one black student. And once again, I was just tickled to death to sit there, because he was the brightest kid in the class. He could drag me through physics, and I could do well. So, but it was difficult. That was difficult. I did not look forward to going to school.
So that's a heavy burden to bear, even as a white person, because I was
upset. You know, if you're looking at the stereotypes that were there, and we were talking about that, and you know, preconceived notions. For me, if somebody were to ask, you know, about the stereotypes that I've seen proven wrong in my lifetime, all of them, and they weren't accepted in our household, so I guess there was nothing for us to prove wrong. But the comments that other people made, you know, I don't know. I don't know how you dispel a lot of these things. If someone has a distorted view of another race or another culture, I think they choose that. I think they select it. And I think they just make it part of their lives, and it shouldn't be. And I think that they're going to still maintain those bigoted views simply because they choose them. And they can make a conscious decision to go the other way or not. In today's society, if you're not engaging with people that are different than you, you've made that choice. Because we've come a long way since 1955. I remember as a child seeing the signs in little Texas towns that said whites only. I remember the colored fountain and the white fountain. I remember my parents, we didn't go into a restaurant because they had the sign out there that said we have the right to choose who we serve. Everybody knew what that meant. My dad knew what that meant. So you had people of color waiting outside to pick up their food as a carryout, but they certainly weren't welcome inside. We weren't going in there. I remember those. Our society has changed tremendously. That doesn't mean, because I still remember as a teenager, I ended up with a friend of mine who needed a place to live. His father had died, and he came to live with us. Vernon was black. In addition, he was gay. There was never a question of his acceptance or of us loving him in our house. But I still remember my sister, who was a year older, Vernon being fearful to go anywhere with her and her girlfriends because he was afraid that something would happen. I remember my hair was long, and I remember being pulled over many times because Vernon was black and I was a hippie. And I remember being handcuffed by the side of the road for, as the policeman said, for my own protection, for our own protection. you know, like we were going to choke ourselves because they pulled us over, I guess. But I remember one police officer saying using the N-word and saying an N and a hippie can't be up to any good as they searched our car. And when it helped me a little when another policeman pulled up, and he was asked why we were stopped, and he gave him the same explanation. And the guy just shook his head and he says, you need to let him go. But this wasn't just a one-time occurrence. So I understand what's going on. It's a different world for us.
So I think you answered number 2, how you bridge the gap, because you just told us how you bridged some gaps. You sat at the table, your parents welcomed Vernon into your home.
Right.
So you answered that by example.
Yeah.
But do you have any
opportunities?
words?
There's a myriad of opportunities. People can lead cloistered lives if they choose to, and it's their loss if they do that. In my circle of friends, I don't think when we're together that any of us are sensing our skin color. I don't know that any of us are looking in the room and going, oh, he's white, she's white, he's black, she's black, they're Hispanic, he's gay. You know, you don't do that. It's just, you're there and you care about one another or your friends, and your mind just doesn't travel there. And I think that if people are going to concentrate on their differences, there's got to be some sort of motive for that. I mean, are people trying to feel superior to somebody else? It was always uncomfortable to be in a gathering when you knew certain people were uncomfortable about the other people of race. And it's like, just for Vernon to worry about him going somewhere with my sister. I never had to worry about going somewhere with my sister. What's the deal? And why would he have to do that? I think one thing that a lot of it is ingrained in us, and we've got to undo that. I remember when we first had our ice cream store downtown Annapolis, there was an African-American man. He was probably in his early 70s, and he washed windows. And he went business to business and would wash the front windows, and he did a spectacular job. He would never look me in the eye. Here I was, 20 years old, and he was early 70s, and he would not look me in the eye, and he would say yes sir and no sir to me. And it bothered me tremendously. And I would tell him, you can look me in my eye, and I'm the one that should be calling you yes sir and no sir, because you are my elder. And that was ingrained in him, that through the things that he had suffered and he had gone through his life. And it's still
for survival. It was ingrained for survival.
Yes, yes. And to know that he probably stood outside those restaurants, you know, that he wasn't allowed to go in, that he drank from the other water fountain. I remember getting yelled at because I drank at the black water fountain. And I turned around and there were other people there, and I said, gosh, I'm still alive. But I remember that people were appalled at that. They were just, and I was a little kid. I was probably 10 or 11 years old. And I just thought there wasn't anything heroic about it. I just thought the stupidity of this is beyond belief. And I think the thing that disturbs me most now is all the venom and vitriol and what's going on. There's not much of an acknowledgement of how far we've come. And it seems like sometimes it feels to me like we've hit a wall. And what I'm not hearing a lot are the words of the man who made the greatest difference in our society when it comes to this. You don't hear on the news Martin Luther King Jr. being quoted. You don't. And
what's your favorite quote of his? Oh my. Well,
you know, there's the obvious one about you know, the character of your heart rather than the color of one's skin. But I think that I probably have two, and one of them you're addressing. The one that you're addressing is that our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And I think that that's significant, but I do like that darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. And hate can't drive out hate. Only love can do that. And we've gotten so far away from that. And there is it doesn't seem like there's any recognition of how far we've come. And we need to do that. And we need to put ourselves in positions where we learn to care about one another, where we have genuine care about one another, where we stand up for things that are wrong, that we make our voices heard, but that we do it in a loving manner. We're not going to change somebody by yelling at them. It's not going to do it. Their heart has to change. Their vision isn't going to improve unless their heart does.
That was a lot to take in and absorb. And I hope that you'll join us again.
I'd love to.
And again. And next time we want to try to pull Charlotte on the panel, if that's all right.
That would be awesome.
Yeah,
because I want to talk to her about churches. I want to know why we still have white churches and black churches. And I don't want to hear that cultural excuse.
Charlotte, he's coming for you. I'll just fade off into the background and sip some tea while you guys talk. But yes, we will get together again soon. And in the meantime, I just want to say that I appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to, when you're starting on a new venture and somebody's excited with you because you don't know if you're doing it right or wrong, and to get a phone call like I did from you, or a message saying, I want to help. You can't imagine what that meant to me, and I've already spoken to several folks. They have a lineup of questions for you, so I hope you'll come back.
Oh, good.
And answer questions from actually both sides, because
I would love to.
You have corn in the crib.
Right.
And the experience from which to speak. So I thank you so much again.
Thank you.
And we'll look forward to talking to you in the not too distant future.
Oh, thank you so much.
Have a good night. Thank you.
God bless.